Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive misconception about human psychology. You see, most people think that if they possess a genuinely rare personality trait, something truly different about how they view the world, they would just inherently know it, right? They assume it would be totally obvious, and they'd feel it radiating from them every single day. But psychology and social observation reveal something completely different. Real, defining traits, they don't announce themselves with a marching band. They actually hide in plain sight. In fact, most people who truly have a rare trait spend years not even realizing it, mostly because they just assume everyone else's brain works the exact same way theirs does. So today, we're going to break down the actual psychology separating the real traits from the absolute fakes.
Okay, let's dive into this. Meet our protagonist for today's explainer. Just a happy little stick figure walking down their own brightly lit path. Now they think they have a rare personality trait, and honestly, you probably do too. But here's the secret. A real trait isn't something you consciously perform for an audience. It's the stuff that kind of just leaks out of you when you aren't looking. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk alongside our stick figure friend here and ask 3 specific, brutally honest questions that will tell you if you actually have a rare trait. And I highly recommend sticking around until the end because the third sign we're covering today is overwhelmingly the most misunderstood, and grasping it absolutely changes everything.
All right, let's hit sign 1, the hidden cost. Because as you'll see, real traits are never free. So ask yourself honestly, have you ever wanted to just turn your trait off? A lot of people, even highly intelligent, super self-aware people, assume that if they have a core trait, it should just feel natural. It should feel as effortless as breathing. But researchers who study personality development have found the exact opposite. A trait that truly defines you doesn't arrive beautifully wrapped up like a gift. Actually, it arrives a lot more like a scar. You paid for it with something deeply uncomfortable. Maybe it cost you profound embarrassment. Maybe it meant being painfully misunderstood or being called weird or too much by your friends. Just imagine our stick figure friend repeatedly trying to navigate a crowded room and constantly bumping into walls because their natural instinct completely goes against the grain. True traits usually come from years of doing something that just didn't work, until finally, quietly, it started to.
Let's use resilience as a quick, relatable example of the difference between what we project and what is actually real. Picture our stick figure claiming to be highly resilient. They say it super easily, proudly wearing it like a badge of honor. But then, when you ask them about the last time they really truly failed at something, they go quiet, they laugh it off, or they completely change the subject. See, they don't have true resilience. They just have a fragile, fake self-image that they're protecting. But a real trait? If our protagonist's defining trait has always been incredibly easy and comfortable for them, they are likely just looking at a cheaper imitation version of it. Real traits are paid for with uncomfortable failures.
And that brings us to our second sign, the exhaustion test. What happens behind closed doors? Think about this. What shows up when you have absolutely nothing left in the tank? Not what you want to show up, but what actually does. Let's fast forward through the day with our stick figure. Imagine them at the very end of a long, incredibly draining day. They've navigated work, awkward social interactions, terrible traffic, you name it. The door finally closes behind them and they are completely, entirely alone. Now we have this deep-seated assumption that our real personality is our absolute best one, right? We like to think our true self is that shiny, polite, perfectly composed version of us. But psychology tells us the exact opposite. Your real, undeniable patterns are the ones that appear exclusively when your guard is entirely down. Now, what's really interesting about this is a concept called ego depletion. Neuroscientists use this exact term to describe how your brain's ability to self-regulate literally runs low when you're exhausted, highly stressed, or just running on fumes. Think about it. Absolutely anyone can fake a good behavior for 10 minutes. Anyone can act totally patient, incredibly confident, or exceptionally kind when they've just had 8 solid hours of sleep and a massive cup of coffee. But the real version of a trait, that is put to the test by ego depletion. So, does your defining trait still show up right after a blowout argument? Does it show up at the end of a grueling day when you have absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone? If your trait only pops up when you are well-rested and highly motivated, kind of like a carefully rehearsed party trick, well, that's not a rare personality trait. It just disappears the second it becomes inconvenient. But a real trait? That's hardwired. It shows up when you are slumped on the couch with zero filter, whether you want it to or not.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our third, final, and honestly most misunderstood sign. The unintended shadow, the trait others see. This is where things get really fascinating, mostly because we're terrible judges of our own behavior. Has anyone ever casually said to you, you always do that thing, or you're totally the type of person who, without you bringing it up first? It turns out other people are often vastly better at seeing our consistent patterns than we are. And why is that? Because they aren't trapped inside our heads. They don't hear our internal monologues, our endless excuses, or our incredibly complex justifications. They just observe what we do, repeatedly, across completely different situations.
You've probably heard of the spotlight effect, right? It's our tendency to totally overestimate how much others notice us. We think everyone is staring at our bad haircut or that tiny coffee stain on our shirt. But here is the massive secret that social psychology rarely tells you. People almost never actually notice the things you are trying to show them. They don't really notice your carefully crafted persona, but they do notice your natural reflexes.
Just imagine, our stick figure genuinely thinks of themselves as incredibly easygoing, super laid back, and totally low drama, inside their own head. But in reality, the outside observation tells a completely different story. 3 different friends at totally different times have independently said to them, "Man, you really care about this, don't you?" Or, "Why do you keep coming back to that?" They aren't saying it to be mean. They're literally just observing it. That right there is the shadow side of a real trait. It doesn't just make you impressive, it makes you predictable. And yeah, sometimes it makes you slightly annoying to people who don't share that exact same trait. If a trait lives entirely inside your own head and absolutely no one else has ever noticed it independently, that's not a trait. That's just a fictional story you're telling yourself.
Ultimately, none of the 3 signs we've talked about today are about being impressive or superior. They are simply the natural, undeniable result of someone who has lived with something for so long that they literally cannot hide it anymore, even when they desperately want to. A trait doesn't win out in your personality because you're proud of it. It wins because it's real.
So, the crucial point is this rapid recap. The real markers of a truly rare personality trait are, number 1, it costs you something uncomfortable. Number 2, it shows up during the exhaustion test, when your ego is totally depleted. And number 3, other people have noticed its unintended shadow, and usually, let's be real, not as a glowing compliment.
Now, I want you to pick just one of these 3 signs right now, and ask yourself honestly, which one makes you the most uncomfortable? Which sign surprised you the most? I genuinely want to hear about it, so please drop your answer in the comments below. If this explainer made you stop and realize something you've never quite admitted about yourself before, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll actually be giving a shout out to one of our subscribers in next week's explainer, and it could definitely be you. Also, if you want to dive deeper into where these rare traits actually come from and why people from certain backgrounds don't even realize they have them until way later in life, click the link right here. Thanks so much for learning with me, and I will catch you in the next explainer.